Chris, good morning. How are you?
Good man. I was just watching the show and I was like, oh, the segment on cars finally came up. Remember we were talking about it. I think was it last week
I
or
think
this
2 weeks
week?
ago. Yeah, we were talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things that we do. I mean, it's not going to impact the economy nearly as much. There might be some banks that are overexposed to the auto loan segment, especially if they have a lot of subprime in their inventory. So companies like Ally is probably like the most exposed to auto delinquency. But once again, like I have to see if they are actually holding those things on the books, or whether they might have actually sold them as ABS. I don't know. Like all I know is for auto loans, Ally seems to be like the one that keeps coming up, you know?
So what is the for I mean, for those that are curious about what could happen if the automotive market collapses, what do you think would be the domino sequence of events that would take place?
Well, first thing we have to do is we have to kind of like go back and figure out like why did we run into this bubble-like situation in the first place, right? So when the pandemic happened, people got a whole bunch of stimulus checks and they were just sitting at home, right? People went out and bought cars, and the thing is, cars being that one of the most like safe, I wouldn't call it safest, but it was a very safe asset class for people to lend money on. Why? Because most people would give up their house and their rent, their apartments before they gave up their car, because the car was like the main motive of, like travel and also job and everything else. So a lot of people bought cars. Now the thing is, a lot of the auto auto dealerships and like the companies, they recognize that, so they basically jacked up the MSRP on a lot of cars.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what ended up happening was people, because they were just so desperate for inventory, they were paying way above MSRP, and that padded the balance sheets of a lot of these auto manufacturers. Now the problem is those supply chains are pretty much all corrected, and now there's a ton of inventory sitting on the markets. And at the same time, you're starting to see the used car market flip because people are not making their payments. And the thing is, a lot of cars are underwater, so there's not a lot of incentive to keep making your payments. So let's say you bought a car that's like a truck, a $70,000-$80,000 truck. It's lost about 2/3 of its value, but you still have another like 4 years to go on your car note. What's going to happen is you're just going to say, well, fuck it, go ahead, take this damn thing, or you're going to try to trade it in and do other things. So one of the things that we're just going to have to deal with is this is going to have to work its way through the system. But the thing that this tells me is that the consumer is finally like running out of spare cash. So you're seeing like a combination of things that are leading indicators, in my opinion, that we're probably headed into a lower inflationary environment, so disinflationary environment. One thing that you're seeing a lot less job openings for the number of people looking for work. So the amount of like wage increases that people could get is actually slowly coming down. So
Right.
like wage inflation is coming down. People are staying at their jobs longer. That's another factor that's being put in there. Now the federal government is cutting back on spending, which is another leg of inflation that really went up. So even though the federal workforce and the state and local workforce only went up slightly, the state and local workforces are also supplemented by a ton of contractors. And I don't know if you've been watching on Twitter, but there's like a lot of DEI contractors that are posting videos that they're getting notices that, like their services are no longer required, all that stuff. So that is going to be a material change. And so these people are going to have to get a job in, somewhere else, hopefully in the private sector.
So you're saying all of this is also going to create car prices, is going to lead to car prices coming down because people are just not going to be able to afford these ridiculous MSRPs.
Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, you're seeing it in the numbers right now. People are not making payments. So the depreciation on the cars are way beyond what people owe on them. So people are just like, if you want, go ahead, tow my shit. I don't care. And this is something, like I said, that we have to be cautious with, because the data may end up eventually making its way into the ether, and then people are going to be like, oh my God, what do I do? And so that's why I kind of like, even though you bought Tesla, and because I've always been public about it, I think Tesla is one of those car companies that you're going to have to really be careful of. They've been pushing down market, and so that's one thing. So their profitability is likely to go down, but at the same time, you're seeing in the used car market, like Teslas are freaking amazing deals in the used car market right now, dude. You could get I was looking the other day, a Cybertruck Foundation series for like high 70s, with like barely 10,000 miles on the thing.
Wow.
It's crazy. And it comes fully loaded with autopilot. With FSD, you know?
That's a hell of a deal, dude. That's not a bad deal.
Dude, I'm seeing Model Ys right now with FSD included, because some people actually bought them for under like 28,000, you know? Like I said, it's if you're in the market to buy a car right now, would be, and especially if you're like a cash buyer, you're doing really well. Like right now is a really good time to buy, in my opinion. Well, maybe in another 6 to 12 months, it'll even be a better deal. So,
right,
you know, yeah.
Okay, well, let me get your take on the market, Chris. It's a green day. We're seeing a lot of momentum. S&P all-time highs. Here's my first question outside of just like your thoughts on the market. The new tenant rent index fell. Do you think that's another piece to the pie of CPI coming down and us getting more rate cuts?
Yeah, that's a leading indicator, man. Like if you look at the data, right, on what it is, when, you know, what happens with housing, unlike other sectors, it's not like an immediate effect. So if you signed a lease, your lease is typically going to be 1 year out. So what happens is, if let's say a year goes by and now, you know, you're up for a lease renewal, you could actually get something lower. You know, go to your landlord and say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask for like $100 less per month, or I'll move somewhere else. So people are finding that newer leases that they're getting more attractive compared to what existing leases are. So if that ends up happening, then that ends up being disinflationary. You're also starting to see, well, at least I'm seeing it, some markets are having a ton of Airbnbs starting to basically come on the market, because like the economy is slowing down to the point where there's not nearly enough people that are going to some Airbnbs to justify the maintenance on it. And the cost of home ownership has gone up significantly. So if you look at like mortgage insurance, right? Like the maintenance on the thing, property taxes, owning a home is becoming less and less desirable, even if you have a great interest rate. So this is one of those times where, you know, you kind of have to just look at the economy and ask yourself, like, okay, are we really in the greatest of shape? And then now you've got, I wonder, and I don't know how this is actually going to impact like the housing market, but the federal government just came in and said all these people have to return to the office, right? All these government workers, like federal workers, a lot of people actually moved away from where they were living and bought homes in other areas. Same thing with the tech companies. A lot of people moved outside of the Bay Area. And now the employers are saying, you need to come back to the office 5 days a week. And they're like, oh shit, I bought a house, you know, like 300 miles away. How am I going to make this happen? So eventually they're going to have to relent and, you know, put their homes on the market, in which case now you've got additional inventory. I mean, even the private sector is doing the same exact thing. Did you see JP Morgan? They said all workers have to come in 5 days a week. No exceptions.
Amazon said something of the same thing a couple of months ago as well, or weeks ago.
Yeah, so both the private sector and the public sector now are in line with return to office, which is actually, you know, which is good technically for the commercial real estate sector, if you think about it. But it may not be the greatest thing for people who have actually changed their entire life around this work from home situation. So we'll see what ends up happening.
What's your take on the new home sales beating by 100,000 this morning?
I mean, dude, the what is that thing called? The builders are putting up every kind of incentive that's out there. So it makes sense, in my opinion, you know.
So even with these high mortgage rates, you think the incentives are so good for people to get into houses?
Well, what they're doing essentially is doing rate buy downs, right? And those are usually I think they're temporary, where they'll say like, look, we'll give you sort of like what is it called? Like a a preferred rate that's lower than if you were just going to buy an existing home. If you go to the existing home and you buy it like a what is that thing called, like a regular house, existing inventory, you're going to go to the bank, they're going to charge you a certain amount. If you go to these new home incentive plans, they're like, hey, we will give you like a much lower interest rate. You know, so that's where you would probably see that new homes are, you know, like better to buy than an older home, you know, because a lot of these builders are trying to get inventory out the door.
There's no feeling of bubbliness in the housing market to you, is there?
I think it's regional. I think if you look at like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, inventory there has actually spiked up, and then there's Northeast, which inventory hasn't necessarily caught up. There hasn't been a lot of building up there. So a lot of people actually moved away from the Northeast and went to some of the parts in the South, you know, for their remote jobs or whatever. Because remember COVID, there were parts of the country that were very restrictive and then parts of the country that weren't restrictive at all. And a lot of people kind of, I don't know, they made the decision that they were going to be remote all the time. So they moved there. And now they're kind of like backtracking and they're moving back. So like, that's one of the weird things that you're seeing in New York City. You're actually not seeing the you know, like a drop in prices. They're actually still high because there hasn't been really a lot of new construction. Whereas Georgia, Florida, Texas, they were building homes like crazy out there.
Right.
So a lot of what real estate is going to be dependent on is going to be supply and demand dynamics, you know. So,
all right, last question for you. Doug says, "Is it time to take profits on the cruise lines?"
No. Cruise lines have got a long way to go, man. You know, I mean, if you anyone who's lost the faith, just sell it and look for other opportunities. You know, I don't think that this is a necessarily like you're going to get rich tomorrow kind of like play. But there's a lot of value that's going to be unlocked over the next couple of years. You know, each one of the cruise lines has figured out a different way to navigate the difficulties that they had to deal with during COVID. So like Carnival Cruise Lines, they took on a lot of debt. But the thing is, they have a huge fleet. So one of the things that they're doing is they reduced down their capex for the next couple of years, which meant that a lot of their operating income is going to go towards paying down their debt. Norwegian took an opposite approach, saying, hey, we see all sorts of tremendous amount of demand and we're a small player, so we're going to double down and keep our growth accelerated and keep up with that. And so they're, you know, each one of these guys is trying to figure out how to navigate the situation. Now, I think both of them are correct. I think the demand for cruising is there. There's a subset of the population that absolutely loves cruising, and they tend to be on the higher, like the older age side, and the older age side people, they got money right now to burn. So, and they're doing it. So if you look at the earnings for the cruise lines, all of them are beating estimates almost every quarter. They're raising their guidances every quarter. And in a lower rate environment, if we do get one in the next year or two, which is what my projection is, these guys are going to be able to, you know, refinance at lower rates and use a lot of that additional cash flow to pay down debt further and also generate more value for shareholders. So
makes sense. It makes sense. Actual last question for you, Chris. SoFi, buy or sell before earnings if you had to?
I don't know, man. SoFi showing profitability, showing growth. So I think they're fine. Like banking right now in general is doing well. Like net interest income, which is what, you know, these businesses are. That's how the banks work, right? You lend them money, they give you a certain portion, they lend it out at a higher portion, and they make money on the spread between the two. And right now the spreads are pretty wide. That's why you're seeing all these financial companies beating. You've got the IPO market starting to come back, right? So that's another avenue for growth for a lot of the investment banks, and SoFi is known to have been participating in some of that business. So there are growth multiples out there for SoFi that could help. The other thing is with the Trump administration, there may not be as much student loan forgiveness, which might encourage more people to actually utilize SoFi. And basically try to work on getting their quote unquote finances right. I don't know what the slogan is for that, but yeah, like I'm not particularly a big buyer of SoFi. I'm more of a new bank guy because I rather see like growth outside the U.S. I want to be exposed a little bit more to emerging markets who have like real GDP growth, and these guys are like dominating in Latin America. Like if you look at their recent statistics in Mexico, dude, they have 10 million accounts in Mexico now, and their deposit base is growing like exponentially. And so because of that, their net interest income is also growing significantly. SoFi, one of the things that always worries me is that they don't have a lot for credit losses, like loan provisions. So I don't know how that's going to impact them if we do get sort of a economic pullback. But with Nubank's just being run like a freaking, it's like amazing business, man. And all these FX headwinds, as they die down with a weaker dollar, which is what the Trump administration is going to do, is just going to boost these guys up. So I'm super long on Nubank. I think they have a great future. One of the things I'm going to recommend you do is I posted a link on my Patreon with like the Spotify interview that was done with David Velez. Really recommend people watch that, because it gives like an entire like background on how Nubank sort of, like started, what the hurdles was, the kind of people that they've hired, what the culture at Nubank is like, and why they're only getting started. Like the goal for Nubank is world domination, dude. And the way that they're doing it is by targeting the areas where the traditional banks have never really ventured into, which is the lower part of the consumer base that has never even been exposed to modern banking services. And now that everyone's got a phone, it's a much easier way to get into that field for a lot of people.
So, and you're in $15 leaps. That's your position, right?
Right now, I have a lot of $15 leaps. Eventually, I want to marry them up and then buy even more spreads. So yeah.
All right. Also, real quick, Zuck's $65 billion. I'm assuming the AI capex trade is in good standings.
Yeah, right now, the thing is, the goal, I think, for everyone is just build out the infrastructure, because AI use cases are starting to pop up everywhere. And the thing is, this is like the innovator's dilemma that all the companies are running into, right? If you don't spend the money, you're going to lose the race, you're going to be behind, and then people are not going to value you as much, and then you'll die, right? So everyone is almost expected to spend to keep up. So if Microsoft is spending money, you got to spend money, and Google is spending money, so you got to spend money just to remain on the cutting edge of things and not becoming going into the bucket of irrelevance. I think there's a huge market in the future for inferencing. So all these data centers and everything else, they're going to get great ROIs. You build, like I told you, the business model is very simple. You build a data center, you rent out the compute, and you rent it out for the next 5-10 years. You make crazy amount of money, and you just keep doing that over and over again. So anytime right now people develop software that utilizes AI, it's not just a model, but you also need to run the inferencing portion of it. How is that going to happen? Well, it's connected to a data center, so all that data center compute is all going to be going back to the hyperscalers. And that's just going to be another vector for growth. I mean, catering-wise, cloud compute growth was about 15% year over year compounded for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't ever see anything. I don't even see an end to that 15% CAGR rate right now. Right. I just don't. Right. Compute is endless. Whether you're looking at robotics, whether you're looking at like the new thing with direct to cell from space.
It's not ending. It is not ending for a while.
Yeah, autonomous cars. All those things require high levels of compute. And there's just getting exponentially more and more. There's more and more demand for it. So if there's anything, the hyperscalers are like, in my opinion, they're the safe bet to be in for the next 5-10 years. These companies could get even bigger than what they are today, even though they're freaking huge already.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Chris's Twitter in the chat. You guys can check him out. We'll talk to you later.
Later, dude.
Thank you, brother. Later. All right, folks. Palantir making its way once again back to 82 Dolores. Not bad. Not bad at all. now I'm just like, I'm honing on this not bad at all thing, because now you guys made me feel like it's a thing. So now every time I say it, I get self-conscious, but now I have to say it's a thing. Dude, pretty cool Friday. 81.86 on good old Palantir. We got Nvidia right here, 146, Google 198, Nubank 1249. We got Hoodie at 50.95, SoFi at 1807, and the broader S&P slightly down at 609.47.